So how did you get into the MMA world then?
So this was during comedy, and all the podcast stuff had just started going off, and I was doing one of my favourite gigs. It was in Maribel in the ski resorts. So you'd go around, you'd do gigs in the chalets, and in the day you'd go skiing. So me and another comic, Carl Donnelly, who's a phenomenal comic, very unique, very original, and always sort of ahead of the game. We were on a ski lift going up, and we were just talking, and he was saying, I don't get why. And he wasn't saying it at me, he was just saying it. He said, if you're a comic, why wouldn't you have a podcast? Why would you not do something which can get you more of an audience? And I was sat on the ski lift going, I ain't got a podcast. I ain't got a podcast. Oh my God, this is going to be a long ride home. And then it was, I couldn't think of what to do. I didn't want to do it on comedy. I didn't want to and basically, I used to watch a lot of MMA. I watched stupid amounts of mixed martial arts, even before it was huge and before it was out in the mainstream. And I used to watch all the interviews back, and then I'd always kind of stop watching the interviews because I didn't like the people that were doing the interviews. Like the same questions, they were usually just geeks that had kind of decided I want to go to a show. So I kind of thought, do you know what, I reckon I could do something with that. And to start with, I did a podcast just with comedians, because lots of them liked MMA. Some of them were martial artists, some of them had fights. So I did a podcast called The Stand-Ups Throwdown. And then again, hobby, just a little sideline, trying to keep Carl Donnelly happy. This thing, please don't hate me next year. Within a couple of months, managers had started phoning me and said, would you interview fighters as well as comedians? And I said, okay. So I did a couple of fighters. And then shows, Bama contacted me and said, we've got shows coming up and your interviews are getting good numbers, good clicks and like good content. Would you come and do the post-fight, backstage interviews for some of the stuff? So I paid for myself to go out to the show, bought myself a crappy suit and a camera, and like even if you look at my first shot, my head's down here and the fighter's up here, and I'm doing the interviews. And it was within like 6 months, and I'd eventually roped a mate in to come and do the filming for me, and I'd done a few shows then, and I said to him, I'm going to get from the backstage, I'm going to get to the cage. I'm going to get to that cage. And within 6 months, they offered me my first presenting job. So it was all, again, just taking a leap, buying a microphone. Yeah. My first edit, if you look at the sound, I did all the volumes per word pretty much. But again, you got to be rubbish before you get good. And yeah, within 6 months I had that. And then from there, it's just moved from doing the interviews to the presenting. I did the Bama presenting. It was at front of camera for some of their events. And then eventually got offered jobs to go and sit cage side and shout loudly while people punch the people in the face.
Yeah, so how does presenting differ from commentating then? Like that's a skill in itself, isn't it? Being able to commentate on, so call what you're seeing to relate to an audience. Yeah, and it's for me it's because I've watched so much. Like as a kid, I wasn't mad on football. I did play a lot of it. I used to watch the mighty Huddersfield Town every so often. But fighting was like, what are you laughing at, mate?
I don't know. I'm an Arsenal fan. I don't know why I'm laughing.
At the mighty. 3 times in a row we won that league. But 1921, 22. But for me, I watched so much of it, and it was kind of natural. I was already fairly relaxed with in front of a camera or on a mic, and with calling the fights, you're sat next to it. The way it should work is I do play-by-play, so I do all the sort of leads and questions, and I sort of do the tell of the tapes and the adverts in between and set everything up. And then beside me, there's an expert, or there should be an expert, and I will fire stuff at them. And for me, it's a dream job because I could get to ask. And sometimes, like now, I've done martial arts a while. You can kind of know what positions are, but I try and educate the audience by asking questions from those certain positions, and especially with fighters from some of the regions that I've commentated in, whether it's Russia or Eastern Europe. If you two tuned in, you'd have no idea who they were. But my job is to kind of make you feel something for them. So as a kind of responsibility, I'll speak to the fighters, I'll do the research, I'll look on their Instagram, I'll try and get as much background as possible so I can tell a story. So when they're making their walk, before they touch gloves and fight, hopefully you two will know something that makes you feel something about one of those guys or girls that'll make you go, I want that person to win.
How long does it take you to, I guess, do the research or pre-production for an event? So like Octagon now, like you're going into an Octagon arena and you've got how many fights? 15 fights?
Yeah, between 12 and 15, something.
How long does it take you to research, well, if there's 15 fights, 30 fighters, like how long does that take you to get that ready?
A long time. That's what people don't get. And this is the bit I always say, I don't get paid for doing the commentary. I get paid for the travel, which is horrific sometimes, and I get paid for the work bit, which is the research. So I'll try and spend like a minimum of an hour on each person, which is 30 hours minimum, all that. I will have relationships, so I will have seen some of the fighters before. I'll know some of the dynamics, so that helps. But I'll always try and dig out something new to talk about. So for me, I've got pages of notes. I've watched not just their fights, but their interviews. Again, I've looked at social media. I've spoken to their coaches, their teammates, and I'll have sometimes 2 pages on this guy, and the fight will finish in 10 seconds. And I'll be like, but that's fine with me, because sometimes I'm calling the fight and it's just wrestling on the ground. And there's not much to say. But if I can be talking about some of the journey or the preparation or the adversity they faced to get to that point, that at least makes it interesting to listen to, even if it's maybe not to watch.
Have you ever thought about that side of it? Because I just think it's wild. It's a bit like...
I wouldn't have, right? But I saw a video, I think it was yesterday or the day before, which it was like a little kind of short thing, but it was showing you, Martin Tyler, you won't know him, does the football commentary, Judge, right? And he was showing, he didn't sound like he was as well prepared as you, Ryan, but he had like a little notepad, and he was talking about like behind the scenes, how do you get prepped for a commentary gig, basically. And I always kind of thought they'd done it from the majority from memory, like especially if you're as old as Martin Tyler, he's been doing it years, right? That you'd just be like, you say what you see, but you don't really, do you? Like, there's got to be some kind of, you've got to be able to bring out some stats or, you say some hooks, nuggets of something to keep it in, especially the wrestling. That's where it loses me a bit. I can still watch it. Yeah. I'm trying to get into it because otherwise I'd have fuck all to talk to Josh about, but he doesn't watch footage.
Jackass 3's out next week.
No, mate, they're on Jackass 9 now or something. But
is this the one with Vin Diesel?
Probably, yeah. But that's what it loses me a little bit there. So I think that's probably where that said though, I can't listen to Michael Bisping.
Oh, why?
I don't know if he was
first ever champion of the UK.
I don't know what's that voice about, man.
Do you know a great story about Michael Bisping? So he did the reality TV show, the Ultimate Fighter for the UFC, and he's from England, and he's on an English-speaking show, and his accent was that bad they subtitled him. and if you listen to him then and you listen to him now, he's actually fixed his accent is clearer and less regional.
I get that. Because I understand this, right? Because when I go to, I will speak very slightly differently. My accent isn't different when I go to America, but the intonation of what I say is. Yeah. So you'll end things like a question. You see what I mean? You're like, hey, can I do your burger challenge today? Rather than, can I do your burger challenge? That's different. But when I listen to Michael Bisping, I'm like, this is weird kind of transatlantic thing, but not in a good way, not like a, I don't know, Peter Sellers or something. It's like this odd, like you're half from Warrington or wherever he's from, and then you like, and I'm like, lad, I don't get it, but like, so it kind of puts me off a bit. He seems like a nice dude. And I like how he takes his eye out sometimes and just kind of
that's around and whatnot. Have you ever seen his movie?
No.
It's so like, for the hype that it had, it looks like it looks like a college film. It looks like a
should have got you filming it, mate.
Oh my god, it's so bad. I could have done a better job.
We don't want him on the enemies list, Michael. We love you, really. We love you.
When I was doing that, do you know when you fought Anderson Silva? So that's an epic fight. If you want to go and watch a Bisping fight that would make you a fan of his, in London against Anderson Silva, one of the greatest of all time. So I did the media there. This is again when I was just starting out doing the media stuff, and I got to go to the UFC, and it was one of my first ones. And there was it's very cliquey, the media. It's very like everybody knows each other, and it's hard to sort of work your way in. And if you're different and you're suddenly a new face, you kind of feel that. So I kind of sat back, and Anderson Silva had a huge press ring around him, and you can't ask proper questions then because he's spinning plates. He doesn't speak the same language. So I was trying to wait for him, but he just shot off. He just disappeared, didn't do much. Bisping stayed for the entire day, like the whole of the thing, and answered everybody's questions individually. And I was the last guy. I was the last in the queue to speak to him, and he was as good with me as he was with the first person that he interviewed. And I thought, that says a lot.
I feel bad now.
That says a lot.
Fucking prick. I hope it
just puts me off a little bit. Like I want to hear the full northern mashings on it, man.
You've pissed off Michael Bisping. You've pissed off Paddy Pimblett.
How else are we going to grow this podcast, lad? Come on,
you should keep shooting him down.
He knows the game. He's got 2 million subscribers.
Mate, He's mates with Blake Harrison, you know, the Neil from Between Us.
Oh, that's supposed to come on, yeah?
Yeah, so hopefully Bryan can put in a word for us.
I'll give him a little nudge.
I've got a good question for you. Do you ever get like, especially with scary people, most MMA fighters are quite scary. Do you ever get like, when you've had to ask them a question when you're doing the interview and stuff, have you ever thought like, I want to ask him a bit of a, you know, when you're trying to plant a question which is going to be something, which they say something, controversial, right? But you know, it's going to maybe wind him up a bit. Do you ever get that?
Yeah, because you've again, I'm not a journalist, so when I was asking questions, it wasn't about just the weight cut or the camp or anything else. I'd be trying to dig into some of the stuff that's real to them, and again, I've had bits where you can see it in their eyes, they're just staring at you, going, "Why are you like, what the fuck?" And I know they got to answer it, and they just give you the look, and you're like, "I've just fucked off the light heavyweight champion of the world completely."
Connor, I know you just snapped your leg in half, but do you call that a beard? Is there anything you could be improving there?